We're going to look at more information on rectangles, rhombus, and square. The other day we looked at the properties of it. I'm going to go back and look at this sheet again. And parallelogram, all of these things are true. Opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so that information is true for all of these down below there. It's true for a rectangle, true for a rhombus, and it's true for a square. What makes a rectangle different than just a parallelogram is it has 4 right angles and the diagonals are congruent. A rhombus was all of these things up here, a parallelogram, but you make all 4 sides be congruent. The diagonals are perpendicular. There's one more property to add to that that's not on this sheet. And we're at it right on here. The diagonals bisect the vertex angles. And what I mean by that is that if you have a rhombus drawn like that, so assume that's a rhombus, and I were to draw this diagonal across here, what it does is it bisects this angle so that this angle is congruent to this one, and this angle is congruent to this one. It turns out, because again, looking at this triangle, just this half of the triangle over here, these two sides are congruent, so it's isosceles, which means the angles opposite the two sides have to be equal. So it bisects this, but it also makes all of these angles be the same. Likewise, this diagonal makes all of these angles. If I were to draw this diagonal in, this angle is congruent to this one, this angle is congruent to this one. And they're all 4 of those are congruent as well. So that's a property that's not written on this sheet that's true, that we'll probably be using at some point. And then a square is combining all of these properties up here together. Okay, so let's look at a couple examples of some problems that we're going to deal with today. Let's say we're given rectangle ABCD, and we're given that the measure of angle ADB, this angle right here, is 80 degrees, and that BE has a length of 12. So now we're dealing with 2 separate things, the angles within it and the diagonal, part of the diagonal length. Okay, probably the diagonal is the easiest because diagonals bisect each other, so this is 12, DE is going to be 12. We also know in a rectangle that the diagonals are congruent. So if this has a length of 24, this has a length of 24. So AC has to be 24. EC then, because this bisects that diagonal, EC has to be half of that. So EC is 12. To find the measure of angle BDC, this angle right here, well, notice that we know a rectangle, this is 90 degrees. So if this is 80, this is going to be 10, right? So angle BDC is going to be 10 degrees. We also want to find what's the measure of angle CBD, this angle right up here. Well, again, if these lines are parallel, these are alternate interior angles, so they're congruent. You also could work within the triangles. If this is 10, because this is isosceles, I know that this is 10, this is going to be 80. Because this is isosceles, this is 12 as well. That means this angle up here is going to be 80. So there's several different ways of finding what that answer would be. Okay, but it's using the fact that the angles in a triangle, or excuse me, in a rectangle are 90 degrees. Now notice that these do not bisect that angle. That's only for a rhombus, not for a rectangle. Not for every rectangle. Okay. All right, so let's look at a rhombus, example of a rhombus. So we have rhombus TUVW. I didn't put that in there. That TUVW and the diagonals intersect at X. Now we know that the diagonals of a rhombus are perpendicular, so I know this is a right angle. This is a right angle. These four are right angles. So I'm going to put that in there. I may not even use that, but I know that it does. XV is 4. Excuse me, XV is 6. Wait a minute, I messed up again. Heck. That should be XU is 6. Okay? So XU is 6. Helps if I have the correct information. And XT is 4. Okay, that's all the information they gave me. Measure of angle TUX is 43 degrees. So there's the information they gave me. We want to find what's the measure of angle XTU. So we want to find this angle over here. Okay. Well, again, a couple different ways you can do it, but since this is a right angle, the angles in a triangle add up to 180, 90 plus 43 is 133 degrees. Take 180 minus 143, and I get 37 degrees. That's what the measure of UTX is then. Okay? Excuse me. 133, not 143. What am I doing? So that should be 47 degrees. Okay? Helps to go back and make sure you're doing it right. 47 degrees. The measure of angle VXW. VXW. Well, that's a right angle, so that's 90 degrees. Okay? As far as the diagonal goes, XU is 6. XT is 4. We want to find out what WU is, right? Okay, so WU is going to be this whole length. Well, because these bisect each other, if this is 6, this is 6. So WU is going to have a length of 12. UX, we want to know what, oh wow, that's pretty easy, 6. Let's say I want to know what TV was. I want to know what this whole length is. Well, if that much of it's 4, this is going to be 4, so it's going to have a length of 8. Okay? So there's a rhombus. Even with all my problems, I got it figured out. Okay. The last example is a square. And we're given that JF equals 2. Now, what do we know about the angles of a square? Well, we know these are 90 degrees. Because a square is a rhombus, this bisects that angle then. And so if this is 90, and each of these are equal, each one of these is 45 degrees. 45, all 8 of those angles are 45 degrees. So keep that in mind. If we want the measure of angle HJG, well, again, because a square is a rhombus, I know a rhombus, these are perpendicular, so in a square they're perpendicular. So that's going to be 90 degrees. Angle JHE. Now we just addressed that because this bisects that angle, it's going to be 45 degrees. If JF is 2, JH is going to be 2 because they bisect each other. EG, this diagonal is equal to this diagonal, so if this is 2, 2 plus 2 is 4, EG is going to equal 4. And that's the information, and it's just, again, just using the properties that are on this sheet for rhombus, rectangle, and square. Whichever shape you have, you can use any and all of those that apply to that figure.